This is AUGforums.com Real Talk. First, thank you to our sponsors, APS Payments, Kenzium, and DataSelf. You can learn more about how our sponsors work with Acumatica by going to augforums.com/sponsors. My name is Tim Rodman, and I'm coming to you live on Thursday, January 21st, 2021. This is episode number 38, From Welder to Consultant, Nick Savage-Mady on his journey with Acumatica and MYOB Advanced. Nick, thanks for coming on today, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, Tim. Thanks very much for having me. So my name, as Tim mentioned, is Nick Savage-Mady, and I am I'm actually an independent consultant for MYOB Advanced for probably the last 7 years. And prior to that, I've been a ERP consultant with various software in England and in New Zealand.
Before we dive into your background a little bit more, maybe you could tell people where you're located and what you were up to for the last week. We were chatting a few minutes before this.
Yeah, no. So I'm actually located in Auckland, in New Zealand, and so because we're currently in the middle of summer, I actually managed to take a week off and go to a place called the Marlborough Sounds, which is the back of Beyond on the top of the South Island. So lots of walking and a little bit of relaxing, looking at beautiful views, and tried to do a bit of kayaking on the top of the South Island. So lots of walking and a little bit of relaxing, looking at beautiful views, and tried to do a bit of kayaking and go out on the boat with friends. But unfortunately, it was a little bit rainy, so not perfect, but really beautiful spot, to be honest.
New Zealand sounds like a great place to be during the coronavirus. That sounds awesome.
It certainly is. It's like I said to you before, we do forget that we're quite lucky in terms of we are miles away from anyone, so we can kind of, stay away from everyone in a way. So it means everything is open and it's summertime and we can do whatever we want. So yeah, we're definitely blessed in terms of that.
So coming back to your background, you mentioned you actually how you started off and how you landed in the Acumatica/MYOB space.
Yeah, sure. So originally, my father had a company in Sheffield, where I come from in England, and I actually at school did business studies, which is kind of like business management and understanding of business, for probably about 3 years. So I went through my education in terms of that, and then got a bit of pressure to kind of join the family business. So I actually changed pitch completely and went and became a fabricator welder, which is basically building things out of metal and a lot of technical and mathematics in terms of the fabrication element, and I actually did that for those kind of skill set, and then I went for what we call in New Zealand an OE, an overseas experience, to Australia, and in Australia did a little bit of the same in terms of welding and other odd jobs just to kind of tide myself over. But then I guess when I came back, I decided that it wasn't really the life for me, because you see people accidentally losing a finger or cutting yourself, or it's a very grimy kind of work. But don't get me wrong, it's the people who do it are very, very smart people. I think we just think of them as tin bashers with a hammer, but believe me, the amount of mathematics that are involved and get done in your head is quite large. So I came back from Aussie and decided to look for a couple of jobs, and mathematics that are involved and get done in your head is quite large. So so I came back from Aussie and decided to look for a couple of jobs, and one of them that I fell on was a company in Sheffield that was doing ERP. So I moved into the ERP space in probably 2004, actually. So and then from there, from the ERP side of things, I learned.
What system was that? I'm curious, when you landed there, what system were you working with?
The system actually was a system called, at the time it was called Customer Focus, but now it's had a few different names. I think the software changed names about 5 times when I was there for the 6 years I was. So it was eventually called. It actually specialized in promotional good distribution companies and suppliers. So, for example, if you've got, like mouse mats, pens, ceramic mugs, all things that you see when you go to them exhibitions. So, for example, like the Acumatica exhibition that they do, the expo, anything that's emblazoned with some kind of branding, we actually dealt with the people who distributed all of those items, and we also dealt with the direct suppliers. So it was actually quite a niche product, and prior to me leaving in 2009, they'd actually launched in America as well. So they're actually they've got an American organization as well. To me leaving in 2009, they'd actually launched in America as well. So they're actually they've got an American organization as well. So it's quite a good bit of kit, actually.
Interesting. Sounds a bit like Harsha's print shop add-on for Acumatica. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't actually, but the kind of the key part to it was actually the ability to quote in several different volumes, and also the ability to upload branded 3D rendering, and so you could actually have the quote with like a picture with a brand on it, and you could then go in and say, do you want 1, 10, 100 or 1,000, and then that would flow through directly into, because we were dealing with suppliers and distributors, everything integrated via SOAP, and it meant that if a supplier actually released the purchase order, it would automatically update in the distributor to say that it's going to be delivered.
You dove right in there. It sounds like you were there about 5 years, and I'm curious, when you did that transition, because I think it's a more common transition than most people would think. I think a lot of people think you get into these systems and you must have been a computer science major in college and you know how to code. But I find more and more myself that the people who are actually really good at it come from a different type of a background, like some liberal arts major or some trade, and I'm curious, in your case, when you were there for those 5 years, your initial jump into ERP, what trade, I'm curious, in your case, when you were there for those 5 years, your initial jump into ERP, what were some of your welding skills that translated? Or, did you feel like it was a complete reboot, or did you feel like your experience welding actually prepared you in some way for ERP?
I would say actually there was kind of 2 elements to it, to a degree, because from a welding fabrication point of view, when you are creating, when you're trying to basically measure up and draw out a job, you go out somewhere and you say, right, what kind of things do you want? And they say, this is kind of design that we want, and then you measure up where it's going to be, and you create a drawing for it, and then you go back to them and say, does this look okay? And then you make the actual thing, and then you go out on site and you realize that there's actually a massive great pipe in the way. So then you have to cut it out and slightly adjust it, and then, like tweak it, and then, make sure that everything fits in their place and they're happy with it. And then you kind of, it's a done job. So from the context of software consultancy and implementation, the same principles actually work between software and fabrication, because you're going out on site and talking to a new business and actually understanding how they run the business, and then you work out and design and build what they actually need, and you take them through the training, which is obviously a little bit different in terms of fabrication. But then you ultimately, and I will say 99 times out of 100, there'll be something you need to tweak, change, alter, to actually get the system up and running, and you'll always get that. And even if you have the proofing side of things, there's a lot of things that will never get thought of until later. So really, like, from going from a fabrication brain to a consulting brain, ultimately it's the same logical thinking, really. And then the second thing I would say is, the one thing they actually gave me was, I've always been someone who likes to take things apart. If it's broken, I'll spend 3 or 4 hours trying to fix it, rather than just, getting something brand new. And, I'll just point this out, we don't have, and this is a weird thing, we don't have Amazon in New Zealand. So we can't just phone up and, we can't just order it online and get it. So I've always been, not only do I have the engineering background, but I really like to know how things work at their end prior to actually setting things up. And that's, again, from the fabrication side of things.
I like those points. And I also like your point about the flow really is similar in that it's more of a job shop mentality when you're approaching mid-market ERP. You're not making widgets. It's not the lower end simple accounting solution that's just out of the box. It's really a trade or a craft, if you will, to get the solution to fit the business. And I could see how there's a lot of similarities between what you were doing before ERP and then getting into ERP. And I always like hearing that, because I think a lot of people who get into ERP come at it from unexpected angles. And sometimes the more unexpected, the more prepared they really are for it. It's not just a straight path from, sometimes the more unexpected, the more prepared they really are for it. It's not just a straight path from your schooling into ERP, from what I found, and that kind of trade background especially, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah, I think it definitely, I've found in the past that it's more about whole, like, in terms of from an intelligence point of view, you've got to have experience in different industries to actually become good with implementation as such. Because I've always said that you and this is the same in everything, you can't teach experience. You've got to have done, because I've done several professions, then you've got to, you gain that experience from that. And it just means, like, from an accountancy point of view, I was fairly good at maths, but accountancy, I'll happily say that, I'm not an accountant, and, there's certain things that I get, I have to ask people. But a lot of it just comes down to translation. So whether or not you're a fabricator, or, you work in a shop, or, you work in marketing, or you work in accounts, a lot of it is down to translation. And once you get past that, then, you're okay.
So you did that first stint from 2004 to 2009, I think you said. And then where'd you go from there? Did you go right into MYOB after that, or do you have a stop in between?
Well, actually, I moved to New Zealand because I've got family over here. So I decided to take the big jump and move over here. And ironic, take the big jump and move over here. And ironically enough, when I first came over here, I had an ideal that was, right, I'll just come over here and jump straight into a job that's exactly the same. And I did actually get hit up to sell the software that I used to implement in New Zealand and Australia, but that never kind of came about. But I went out looking for jobs and went to a few of the local vendors, and MYOB was, funnily enough, MYOB, I sent an email to them directly and said, I'd be happy to know how to learn your software, and also, if there's any kind of places going, and never heard anything from them. And then I ended up working for a company called Courier Post, who literally on the phones talking to people about delivering packages and everything like that. And if you need money, then just don't take pride out of the equation and just go and earn some money. And then when I was working there, I saw a job for MYOB on the support desk for their payroll products, and I sent it through to the relevant kind of agency. And funnily enough, the agency came back and said, I don't think you're suited for it. And I phoned them back instantly and went, I think I am. And he said, well, let me have a look at your resume. And then he went, yeah, you are actually. So the lucky, I know exactly. But the lucky bit was when the guy phoned me up, a guy called Sarbag, he said, can you come over for an interview today? And I went, yep. And it was literally the next building from where I was working for some reason. So I ended up going through the interview, and they were happy with me, and so I ended up on the MYOB payroll side of things. And then after about 4 months of being on the payroll support desk, I got tapped up to start working in the ERP side of things, because there was a position that had become available, and someone came along and said, do you fancy coming and working in the ERP products instead? So that's how I went from support to implementation and trainer pretty quickly after joining.
And then from there, were you actually, I don't recall if I know the answer to this. Does MYOB do the same thing as Acumatica in that they only sell through partners? And then from there, were you actually, I don't recall if I know the answer to this. Does MYOB do the same thing as Acumatica in that they only sell through partners, or do they do some direct implementations? Like, were you just assisting with implementations, or how does it work down there?
Yeah, so the way in which it works actually is MYOB has several different divisions, and they also have, I think we worked it out one day, we have 21 different ERP products. So it's quite a lot of products that overlap each other. And in terms of payroll, I think we had, at one count, I think we had 60 payroll products, because it's a ANZ product, but we kept on purchasing different companies. So the way in which MYOB worked was that for the payroll products and for the smaller ERP products, I used to go out on site and train people how to use like the payroll and also the time and attendance product, which was kind of like installing time clocks, linking the time clocks into the system and getting all of the times flowing through, and then flowing that into the payroll. But from the ERP perspective, that was a little bit different. So there was a product that I started with, which was MYOB EXO, and we sold that through partners, or I suppose with yourselves, ISVs. And what I did from that perspective is I actually trained all of the partner consultants in New Zealand and quite a few in Australia on how to implement the product. So taking my experience of implementing back in England and transposing that to new consultants coming in. So actually that was New Zealand and quite a few in Australia on how to implement the product. So taking my experience of implementing back in England and transposing that to new consultants coming in. So actually that was real good fun, actually.
That's interesting. So you kind of like a consultant to consultants in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're called professional services, which is a very vague kind of terminology, but our main kind of thing was to train the trainers, to train the people who are going to be working for these partners. And also the other factor was to actually do presentations of any new releases, so any new releases of EXO that came out, but also we would help the implementers if they were doing like a hard kind of figure out, someone's asked for this, how do we do this within the product? Then I would go through kind of like the process and figure that out, and then go back to them and say, try doing this and this. So there's a lot of kind of like troubleshooting. And also the great thing was I used to work with the development teams to explain to the development teams how the product actually works outside in the community, because a lot of developers just sit in a room and just do what they're told. They don't really know the real life cases as well. So it expanded kind of like what I was used to doing into more of a, like I said, training the trainers as such.
So you started off in payroll, then you got into ERP with EXO, and then from there, like about what time did you get involved with MYOB Advanced / Acumatica?
So roundabout, I would say probably around about June, July 2013. We decided that we needed something that was in the cloud, because there's a product in New Zealand and Australia and America now as well, in England, which is called Xero, which is kind of tackling the small market businesses. And they kind of took MYOB a bit unaware. And they're in the cloud accountancy software, which is pretty good product. So what we realized was we needed something in the cloud for not only our small businesses, but also for our larger businesses. So there was kind of a thing of where we thought, if we build it, it's going to take us about 5 on, was Acumatica, which obviously was a very good choice because it was a, smartly designed system. And at the same time, it was, very comprehensive, like massive. So that was my first introduction, was probably around about June and July. And then Sergey, we spoke to Acumatica about getting people trained up on it. And Sergey, who's over in Singapore, came over in, I think it was October, around about 2013, October. And he came over for, I think, a full 5 days and gave us, like a training session. And I think, and this makes me think about when it comes down to training of people, I think there was about 30 or 35 people sat in that room. So all of the MYOB consultants, developers, product managers, and so on and so forth. And even some of the product managers from the other products like MYOB EXO got to learn about Acumatica, and consultants from Australia came over. So Carl Brooks, who's been on this podcast before, he was in there as well. And that was our kind of like first introduction to the Acumatica side of things, really.
I'm getting goosebumps over here. You might call it goose pimples. Then in terms of parallel paths, both of us didn't take a straight line to ERP, and then I got my hands on Acumatica in April of 2013, just a few months prior. You got a more formal introduction to it than I did, and now we haven't gotten here yet, but we're both doing independent consulting, so it's pretty cool. I'm liking the similarities in introduction to it than I did. And now we haven't gotten here yet, but we're both doing independent consulting. So it's pretty cool. I'm liking the similarities in both of our paths so far. But sounds like 2013, you started getting into it. And, I'm curious, being at MYOB with multiple products there, what was the transition like for you? Was it you just cut everything else off and went full steam into Acumatica, or was there this transitional period where you're wearing multiple hats?
So I would actually say, I mean, from the MYOB point of view, it was quite firstly, it was quite a steep learning curve in terms of, got up to speed with to get Acumatica into like a MYOB OEM side of things, because what you got to take into context is, and you completely will, know this side of things, tax, payroll, even language, to be honest, because I'm not going to say Americans don't write things correctly, but it's one of the things, being a former colony and all that side of things. It's British English versus American English, so all of those things had to be actually factored in. And then also Acumatica obviously writes in different language, so even though it's .NET and that side of things, we also had to learn. And I think Ruslan came over for that side of things to like train up the developers. So that was an interesting set of training to be sat in on that as well. But from the point of view of MYOB rolling out advanced, I would say it took about another year before it actually got released to the public, and we had to work out the first ever training course for MYOB advanced. So we had some New Zealand partners, and so that was fun because everything was brand new, and you had to train people to actually implement a brand new system that they've never done it before, which you've only learnt probably about a year before. So it was definitely kind of like bleeding edge. And like you say, with the products, I was still working with MYOB EXO at the time, and MYOB Advanced. And I would say that continued all the way through until I left in, I think it was February 2018. I was always working with both products because both have large client bases. Advanced, I would say, had a bit of a lesser client base by the time I left than EXO, working with both products because both have large client bases. Advanced, I would say, had a bit of a lesser client base by the time I left than EXO, but now that's starting to kind of get very close to each other. So yeah, unfortunately I wasn't allowed to drop one product. I had to do both, which you have to be very agile to do that, and your brain definitely takes a little bit of a pounding, as you can imagine.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's a common scenario, right? You just can't let go of the cash cow, or the more bigger cash cow, I should say, when you're picking up the new one. You brought up language there, and I'm curious, putting in the new quote, quote, language, did you just use the standard translation dictionary feature, or did you have to do anything?
A translation? Actually, no, we didn't. We didn't use a translation dictionary. We actually did it behind the scenes. So I think we actually recoded it behind the scenes. So we had a very good technical writer, a guy of the name of Josh, and he does a lot of the videos that go out for like new releases as well. And so he had to go through every single part of the system and figure out, I mean, for example, labor is a prime example. He had to go through and find out all these different things, but and there was also check boxes, believe it or not, check boxes and checks and things like that, little things like that were obviously different. But then there was also from a context of I personally know of drop ships because I dealt with America personally know of drop ships because I dealt with America with the company in Sheffield, but things like drop shipping, blanket orders, vendors, inventory, those are Americanisms that get used in software that probably the guys in America don't realize, but over here we'll call them suppliers, we'll call them stock items. So a lot of that had to actually be kind of translated in the system as well, just to make sure that people actually understood what each bit actually meant. So little things like that you don't really realize. And that's one thing I would definitely say from a context of software in different countries. Translating those different kind of things is one thing, but as you know, Tim, and you're living in the States, tax is very different in each country.
That you made earlier, going from welding to ERP, a lot of those skills were there. They just needed to be translated, and it's when you actually translate them that the light bulb goes off, right? And you realize, oh, there's actually more similarities than I realized. I think if you hadn't taken the time to do the boring but necessary work of translating just the labels and the screens and everything, you would not have had the success that you've had with MYOB, at least in my opinion, right? I mean, you really have to do that rather boring translation exercise to help people realize that it really is the same, and that the fact that you picked up an Acumatica product, which I still don't know if it's an American product or if it's a Russian product with so many developers in Moscow, but either way, it really is. It's got what you need. You just have to do that little translation piece and the tax piece, as you mentioned. But, would you say that 80% or so of the, but either way, it really is, it's got what you need. You just have to do that little translation piece and the tax piece, as you mentioned. But, would you say that 80% or so of the system really did just carry over into Australia, New Zealand?
Yeah, I definitely would. I'd say 80% of the product, was, could just be used straight off the bat, because, like I said before, it's kind of with software changing from one software to another. It's going from like MYOB EXO to Acumatica. Even for me, I had to translate that this screen is actually this new screen in another system. And that's one of the things that we kind of have to do as consultants, is to handhold people, because if you're moving from one system that you've been using for the last 10 years, everything is unfamiliar. So if you're moving from something that comes from another country as well, then, that familiarity takes a little while to actually, to gain. Because I think you probably agree that, well, I don't know if you'll agree, but when you are moving from one software to another, people kind of have a tendency to try and make the new software the same as the old software that they've been using.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, there's another thing I've seen in that if you don't spend the time to make that translation with the client, then it's not that they revert to the old system, because they can't. They just revert to paper or Excel or something outside the system, right? And
yeah,
I like to phrase it as, you've got to get the knowledge from your brain down to your fingertips. You couple hours and get the brain knowledge. You get the confidence that, okay, this is going to do what we need it to do. But then getting that knowledge down into your fingertips, basic navigating through the system, and just getting that muscle memory and that second nature comfort level where you just know where to click and you don't even have to think about it. It just takes time, right? And it takes discipline, and it's boring. So a lot of times it becomes the last priority for people, but it's necessary, whenever you're moving to a new system. Otherwise you revert back to the way you always did it.
It's basically, one of the key things that we do as consultants is nurture, because you can train someone and you can you can teach. I read a stat once which reckoned that you only take in 25% of what is taught you. I don't think it's completely true, but for example, if we did 5 days training, it's complete, we actually do as consultants is you're constantly like nurturing the person to say, no, I don't expect you to remember everything. You've got to do this. And it's kind of, even though you're repeating and helping them again, it's actually nurturing them to getting to that point where they go, oh yeah, I get it now. And that's the bit that is really good when you see someone go, yeah, I get it. And they can run with it and they're happy. That's kind of like one of the key things to the job, actually.
I like your word nurture for that. Sometimes I think it feels like babysitting, but I like the word nurture. I got the better description, more description.
It is. It's a bit of a, I'm going to say, you also learn how to say different words as well to come up with things. So
another word I like to use in that process is momentum, because I feel like, to your point, it's not just sit down for 5 days and momentum. Because I feel like, to your point, it's not just sit down for 5 days and big brain dump and you're good to go. It's more of an endurance race, right, to get through it. And that there's only so much you can take in at a time. You still got your regular job to do. And it's a longer process than you'd like it to be. But, just like a marathon or any type of endurance race, it's just something you got to keep at for a while. And so I like using the word momentum in there as well, in that I think it's really difficult to get momentum where you feel like, all right, I'm at least making progress, but it's very easy to lose momentum, right? You take a week off or 2 weeks without having any meetings that force you to look at the new system. It's easy to then kind of get to a standstill, and restarting can be just mentally challenging, right? So I like keeping momentum on a project, deciding, all right, what realistically can we do? Is it one day? Deciding, all right, what realistically can we do? Is it 1 day a week? Is it 2 days a week? A couple hours each meeting, whatever it is. And then we commit to that so we keep momentum on the project. Otherwise, if you stop, it's hard to restart, and keep it going.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And over the years, there's certain key things that you as a professional actually learn, and a couple of things. I mean, like you say, the momentum side of things. I actually did I did the demo data for the New Zealand and Australian systems, and the one thing I learned from that was like the momentum of getting the people who I was working with. If you have like weekly meetings, daily meetings, that kind of thing. The constant communication, but also at the same time, right, who's doing this, and setting out what people are actually doing. You didn't quite communicate as much as you should have, and projects fell down to your manager would have to get involved in that side of things. So you definitely work those things over you work out those things over your experience about getting things flowing correctly, because I always think of it as you can't just do an implementation and then just leave them and then move on to the next one, because unless they are happy and it's working, then you're going to have more problems down the road, really.
Have you found that silence doesn't necessarily mean everything's going fine? Like you have to proactively check in, or do you find that you hear if there's issues?
Someone I used to work with said no.
Hear if there's issues.
Someone I used to work with said no news is good news. I have the opposite. No news is bad news. That's why I think.
I like that. So, I find the same thing. I think Murphy's Law is very applicable to ERP implementations. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. So don't assume it's just going right.
Yeah, exactly. And funnily enough, you also have to take into context the different countries as well. So I find Australia is very happy to come straight forward and say, this isn't right, and jump up and down. Whereas New Zealand are a little bit more British. They kind of keep quiet and you don't know anything's actually wrong. And then, a couple of months down the line, you suddenly realize lots of things are wrong. So always checking in, making sure that people are okay. Having those weekly kind of catch-ups is crucial.
That's an interesting point. I think in the States, it's similar. Like in New York, very blunt, very in your face, you'll know. But, especially more in the middle and maybe somewhat laid back California as well. Just more, oh, it's all good, things are fine when they really aren't. I think that's a great point. You got to consider the culture of the country, the area, and even the company culture of the particular client you're working with to know what the response really means, right?
Yeah, exactly. 'Cause I mean, for such as yourselves, United States is essentially 50 different countries. So it's, I think if we look at it from and it's the same with Australia, it's the same with New Zealand. If you're dealing with the South Island, and it's a lot of Canterbury and Southland, which are right down the bottom end of the South Islands. Australia, it's the same with New Zealand. If you're dealing with the South Island, and it's a lot of Canterbury and Southland, which are right down the bottom end of the South Islands, they're very much rural, and they are a spade is a spade. And one of the key things I actually think that I've learned being in New Zealand is honesty. If something can't do something, you just say to them, listen, I don't think it can do it. I'll find out if it can do it or not. And if it doesn't do it, then you just say, no, we can't actually do it. And I think honesty actually it's people respect your integrity for doing that.
I agree. I think that's such an important thing on the consulting side, no matter where you are, because there's always that transition from sales to consulting, and sales has to close deals. So there's always some over promising, and then you've got to,
like managing director, he's a very smart guy, but you did get on site and just go, what did he promise them? Okay, right, okay, we'll have to figure this out. But what we started doing was we had, and I think Acumatica obviously do this side of things, is pre-sales consultants. So I actually instituted that the implementation person went for like the final kind of like sales presentation, just to keep in check that everything the salesperson was saying was correct, but also like a flow over, so we knew what was going to be happening once we actually got into the implementation. And I think, again, from one of the things I did at MYOB with the partners, I used to go out and do the pre-sales with the partners to help them sell. And it was good to kind of be there, because you could just chime in and say, oh, no, actually, you can do this, this, and this, or no, that's not quite right. So once the customer knows what they can actually do, I think rather than just saying yes, 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 you got to say, well, we might have to investigate that and come back to you.
There's a book I actually put a bunch of my notes into a blog post on called Flawless Consulting by a guy named Peter Block. And the word he uses for it is authentic. And I like the way he draws the line in that you have to be able to authentically describe how you really think things are going without getting emotional about it. And I think that's the line you're always walking, right? You have to be honest and authentic, but not getting personally or politically involved. Otherwise, it doesn't go well.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yes, definitely.
So you were at MYOB for a while, and I think you mentioned it doesn't go well.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yes, definitely.
So you were at MYOB for a while, and I think you mentioned February 2018 you left there, and now you're off independent. Is that right?
Yeah. So I was at MYOB for around about 8 years, and kind of became a little bit of a part of the furniture, in terms of, I've been there quite a while, but I decided to kind of like leave MYOB, because I actually needed a bit of a decompression, to be honest. And so I went away to Italy, France, and England for about 3 months, just to kind of, because the only time to ever have a real holiday is in between jobs. And one of the key things I actually did when I enjoyed doing So things like training, I love doing training because I love interacting with people, but I also like, the education perspective as well. And things like support's great, but support is a constant kind of thing. So we're figuring out, and implementation. I actually do quite like doing implementation. So figuring out what kind of bits I enjoyed doing and what bits I didn't enjoy doing, and then kind of monitorizing and working out, what I could actually do. I mean, for example, like you said, with report, like you're doing at the minute with reporting, if I want to do this and I enjoy doing this, then how can I actually make it into a viable business? And one of the key things coming back to New Zealand was I make it into a viable business. And one of the key things coming back to New Zealand was I, through my involvement with lots of different business partners. So from the context of MYOB, I would say there's about 40 to 45 business partners in Australia and probably about 30 in New Zealand. So all of these people I'd had touch point with, and some of them I, am personal friends with. So it meant that experience had built up my network. So coming back, it was kind of working out, right, what do I want to do? Who are the people that potentially, I can work with? Because as you're probably learning, Tim, consultancy is, you've got to work out what rate to charge, but also you've got to work out if people are going to actually pay you, and who you can actually work with in the first place. So it was a very interesting learning curve, because I'd gone from working for a business, working for a big corporate business, to working for myself, doing my tax myself, all of those things. So it actually gave me a better stead in terms of how businesses run themselves, because I am now effectively a business.
I don't know if anyone else listening is going to care about it, but I sure care about it. So I'm going to keep asking. You're ahead of me in this independent journey. And what were those things for you, at least initially, that you decided you wanted to do? You mentioned you wanted to do training. You didn't want to do support. Do you also like the project management side of things? What are those things that really get you excited?
Yeah, so to start off with, I mean, I wanted to
project management side of things. What are those things that really get you excited?
Yeah, so to start off with, I mean, I wanted to go out as an independent trainer as such. So kind of take myself out there and say, right, if you've got brand new people within your businesses, then for the business partners, then I'll work with your new staff members. So there was a company in Australia who took me on to do that side of things, and they just got a new support team. And so I basically went in and trained them up on EXO and trained them up on Advanced. And it gave me a bit more free reign, because previously you're stuck to, we're going to train on this product, we're going to train on this kind of module. So for example, with MYOB Advanced, you'd have training to do with the core parts, something that people really use quite a lot. So things like that, I'd done project training for certain partners at MYOB, but that's something I could kind of like then scale off and do instead. So you do like projects, you'd look at things like fixed assets, you'd look at, like all the different elements that previously you didn't train on, and roll those out as different courses. And even things like reporting, SQL, MySQL, which so MYOB Advanced is based on a MySQL data backend. So it's actually different to Acumatica. It's not SQL. It's MySQL. So things like that I could actually teach and run. And then we worked out, like, training maps and things like that. So if you want to become this kind of training maps and things like that. So if you want to become this kind of consultant, then we do these training courses. So that was kind of cool to do that side of things. But I would say that eventually you do realize that even though that's ideal, you need bigger partners or bigger companies to be able to actually run those, because otherwise you run out of work fairly quickly in terms of that. But I suppose from that point of view, I end up doing a bit more support for them, and then eventually I got asked to work with a New Zealand partner on pure implementations for advanced. So I've kind of moved across into that side of things.
Do you also like the project management side of things on an implementation, or is it more the technical problem-solving type things that you like diving into?
I mean, I would say the project management side of things, I don't mind that side of things. I would say that, I mean, I don't know if you find as well, because the guys that I work with now, we have a few projects ourselves. Then, you know, there's no kind of like, essentially we don't have many backups as such. So, you know, like there'll be one person for like 2 or 3 implementations. So project management, you do have a little bit of it, but a lot of it is, a lot of it kind of gets done at the time of actually doing things. So I don't necessarily get the chance to do the project management side of things as much as possible as I do.
No, I appreciate you sharing that stuff. I think you got to have. No, I appreciate you sharing that stuff. I think you got to know what you're good at, and you try to do that as much as you can. But you've always got to fill in the gaps when you're doing independent consulting with whatever you can get your hands on. And I think a classic challenge that we all have in the mid-market ERP industry is being a jack of all trades, master of none, where you do a lot of things fairly well, but having those few things that you do really well, it's always a challenge to stay focused in those areas and not get spread too thin, especially with a broad product like Acumatica.
Yeah, and I mean, the one thing I would definitely say is that from becoming independent, you get a lot less time to upskill unless you actually are focused on doing it. So, I mean, like you say, you need to be very adaptable to anything that gets thrown at you. And you don't have the backup of, oh no, this person's going to do reports or this person's going to handle, like the data. So you definitely have to still be very adaptable. And one of the things being an independent is you can't just take 4 or 5 days out. Well, you can, but you can't just take 4 or 5 days out to learn like a new part of the actual product. Because I went, a couple of the companies we dealt with wanted to do service management. So the Acumatica videos, the university videos were fantastic for that. But that's where you have to actually sit down and do 3 or 4 days worth of learning and really, really understand the product. Whereas if you work for a company like Acumatica, or if you work for a company like MYOB, you do be able to actually still get paid and learn at the same time. So that's definitely one thing I would point out, Tim.
So what's the future look like for you, at least the near future? I've got 2 angles to it. I guess the first angle I'll start is just on the business side, working independently. How's that going for you? And, where do you see that going in the future?
I mean, working independently, like I said, because I'm actually working with a couple of guys in New Zealand who are independents anyway. They basically work with, I suppose we're kind of, what would you call us? We're like a collection of contractors, but we work under a certain company name. So that's going pretty well, to be honest. It's pretty good. We had a great year in terms of contractors, but we work under a certain company name. So that's going pretty well, to be honest. It's pretty good. We had a great year in terms of implementations, and in terms of even going through the COVID side of things. I mean, that's been a definitely interesting thing. It's probably been my best year in terms of that side of things, in terms of salary and earning and whatnot. So can't complain on that side of things. Going forwards, I think I'll stay doing what I'm doing with the same company for the time being, because there's certainly more sites to be implemented, and also I think there's a few other people that we're talking to who will come on board and help us out, so we can kind of like spread it even. Other people that we're talking to who will come on board and help us out, so we can kind of like spread it even, spread it out even more and get more sites. So really, I would say that the place I am at the minute is a good place to be, and also, I've not got any future aspirations, because just being able to earn the money, like I said before, there comes a point where earning the money is a good thing, and not being mercenary or anything like that. But money definitely helps you do the things you enjoy, which is going away for a week and being on boats and kayaking and things like that. So it's always a good thing.
I love it. You know how to do it right down there in New Zealand. You mentioned COVID. It sounds like maybe.
Yeah, I definitely, I would say that, I mean, initially when I was working with the other company, when you're working for bigger companies, they obviously have to downscale themselves. So that was actually one of the reasons I kind of moved, because I said, take the money that you're paying me to pay other people, because, I can find other work. So I kind of, but from the adoption point of view, I would say that people definitely looked at that side of things. I was talking to a guy who I used to work with, and he actually does software for doctors. And even from a cloud point of view in that side of things, he said they just, everybody just instantly came to them and said, oh yeah, we need cloud products. So from an Acumatica point of view and MYOB advanced point of view, it really, really pushes people's minds on to, can we do this? And one thing as well is when people were saying to me, how are you going to cope working from home? I've worked from home for the last 2.5 years. So it doesn't affect me whatsoever. And if anything, it cements the fact that I can work for an Australian company, or work for, work in the UK, or, like be in other parts of the world and still keep my business going from wherever I am. So it definitely helps being a consultant in Acumatica as well as a company using Acumatica.
What about on the product side of things? So now that you're independent, it sounds like you mentioned still doing some EXO work. Have you been able to spend a greater percentage of your time on Acumatica / MYOB Advanced, or is it about the same between EXO and Acumatica? Still doing some EXO work. Have you been able to spend a greater percentage of your time on Acumatica / MYOB Advanced, or is it about the same between EXO and Acumatica?
I actually, I only deal with MYOB Advanced now. So that's good. Okay. Because, yeah, so yet again, from the point of view of, like we said before, being stretched too thinly across different products. Originally, I kind of thought that I wanted to work in EXO, but then I realized that as soon as you go back to Acumatica, it is I wouldn't necessarily say it's 100% a better product, because you always have little nuances that one product does better than another. But in terms of usability and adaptability and being able to change things. It means that you don't get as many headaches as you would with a kind of like a in-house where someone's gone in and tweaked the code in the SQL and all that kind of stuff. Advanced is a lot simpler for that for us.
I hear you there. I totally agree with that. I like too, most new Acumatica customers, although I think that's where it's a little different with advanced. I don't think you can deploy on-prem at all, right? It's only SaaS.
Yeah, it's only SaaS. Yeah, it was a decision that they made to do it only SaaS, and it was I would say it was a good decision. It definitely was.
Yeah. Yeah, even with Acumatica, I know the vast majority of new customers are SaaS, and I found the same thing. You know, as much as I really like SQL and I like the ability to query the database, I like even more, in a sense, not being tempted to do that. Even more, in a sense, not being tempted to do that, because it just really makes things so much more stable and so much more reliable and scalable, etc. Just, you know, using the Acumatica framework interface.
I would say it definitely does. And I mean, there are certain limitations that I have to explain to people, like, you know, like sign in, you know, like network sign-ins and all that kind of stuff. So where you've got your Windows network, and there's certain features that you can't use if you're in a SaaS-based solution. And that's things that I've learned. I was trying to think off the top of my head, certain things that you can't use, but like, you just have to realize that if you're using a SaaS-based solution, then you do have a little more limit to what you can do. Not much. You do have a little more limit to what you can do. Not much, but it does mean that you don't have to worry about, because honestly, one of the main things that we used to find was with a server-based system with SQL is that if it would bounce from one partner to another, so the client might change to 2-3 different partners, you would always be trying to work out what's being coded, what that code actually does, and then fix the code as well as fix the problem that it caused. So that more hands-off approach and using exactly what's in the box is a far better way of doing things.
I totally agree with you there.
Exactly.
Hey, I know we're coming up here on the top of the hour, and I love hearing about your journey. I also like on the top of the hour, and I love hearing about your journey. I feel like I've got someone whose footsteps I can follow in, since you're ahead of me in this independent journey. But I'm encouraged. I've got some companionship now. But, you know, anything else that you'd like to bring up and just share with anyone listening about your personal journey, or about Acumatica, or where you think things are heading?
I mean, to be honest, it's really kind of giving people a bit of an understanding of, I mean, from a customer point of view, and from a new anybody who's thinking of becoming a new consultant and things like that, I would just say really the key kind of things is and you'll know this from doing it for many years, is just really my kind of key things are, you know, understanding the process, and lots of community just keeps on adding things and just keeps on increasing the capability that's in the system. And I would say that try and keep ahead of the curve and try and learn the new things that come out. But from a consultancy point of view, I would always say that fully understand something before you try and roll it out, because that's you don't want to be causing the customer headaches. You always need to understand it first. And one key thing I would actually very much say as an independent is you by yourself, so find help. So the Acumatica user group and all the other ones that I'm part of, like the advanced user group and Stack Exchange, you should definitely sign up for those kind of things, because if you can't figure something out, you'll drive yourself mad. So you need other people to bounce things off. And there was a thing that a business partner once said to me, which was it was something to do with it's not very PC, I suppose, the wooden Indian side of things. And it was where you can bounce ideas off just an inanimate object to help you kind of figure things out. So always seek help and find ways to do that sort of things.
Great advice. Hey, Nick, thanks for coming on today and sharing your story.
No problem. Thanks very much for having me, Tim. And if you ever get stuck and need to ask me questions as well in terms of consulting, then chuck me a line by all means. Always happy to talk.
And I always like dropping a link to your LinkedIn and your AUGforums.com profile and the additional links. Do you mind if people reach out to you? Even, I don't know if you're open to Acumatica work in addition to a link to your LinkedIn and your AUGforums.com profile and the additional links. Do you mind if people reach out to you? Even, I don't know if you're open to Acumatica work in addition to MYOB advanced work if people are looking?
I would say probably for the time being, I can, answer questions on like the user group, that side of things. But I was going to say, I don't know, I don't know the state side of things. If anyone asks anything more than that, because I know you guys, the tax is like absolutely insanely difficult in my mind. So I probably can't answer that.
Well, actually, I'm the same way. I used to get pinged a ton on LinkedIn. I still do to some extent, but my response now is, hey, how about you just ask it in the forums? Because the other thing is I might not know the answer, and someone. Well, I hope you recover from your vacation without getting too depressed. It sounds like you had a good one. And thanks again for coming on.
All right. Thanks very much, Tim.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of AUGforums.com.